A new Florida law goes into effect on July 1st, allowing the state to survey students, faculty, and staff at public universities and colleges on their political beliefs. The survey is meant to determine, quote, the extent to which competing ideas and perspectives are presented. Governor Ron DeSantis says that this will help support, quote, intellectual diversity.
It used to be thought that a university campus was a place where you'd be exposed to a lot of different ideas. Unfortunately, now the norm is really these are more intellectually repressive environments. You have orthodoxies that are promoted and other viewpoints are shunned or even suppressed. We don't want that in Florida.
For more now, I'm joined by Ana Ceballos. Ana is a reporter for the Miami Herald and writes about the survey in a recent article. Ana, what are the problems raised by this survey, and does it face legal challenges?
So right now, there have been no legal challenges, but there have been a lot of concerns raised by university faculty members and even and as well as Democrats in the legislature. Concerned that this could send a potential chilling effect in the freedom of speech of some professors who might not feel comfortable sharing their beliefs and viewpoints, or who might just feel like there could be some consequences for what they say in these surveys. So there's definitely been some pushback, but right now there have been no legal challenges. This is set to become law on July 1st.
Governor DeSantis and several state lawmakers kept pointing to a lack of intellectual diversity. Did the lawmakers who wrote this bill point to evidence to support why this survey is needed? And what then do they expect to do if their fears about a lack of intellectual diversity pan out?
Right. I mean, during the regular lawmaking session, there was a lot of debate on this bill, and a lot of the evidence that was pointed to was mostly anecdotal evidence. And it was Republican lawmakers who were saying that they've heard from a lot of conservative students in other states, not so much Florida, about their concern about speaking their minds. If they fear that if they spoke about their conservative views, they might face backlash from students or professors. And now that the governor has signed this bill into law, we're hearing the narrative or the attacks and a coordinated effort to really cast state universities here in the state as quote unquote socialism factories or as intellectually repressive. They haven't really named names in terms of which specific universities have been, encounter these problems. They haven't named specific departments or professors, but we are hearing generalities about the state university system and universities in general as, having problems with welcoming conservative viewpoints. And that's what this bill aims to do for proponents. They want to make sure that conservative students are not feeling repressed when they express their conservative viewpoints. And the survey is meant to outline whether there is a problem or not. That's what the ultimate outcome is.
So it's going to outline whether there's a problem because it was largely anecdotal, is what I'm hearing from you, Ana. So do we know what Florida lawmakers will then do with the results of this survey? Are they empowered to do anything with it?
So right now, there are a lot of uncertainties related to this bill, just as we know what the bill says, that universities and colleges will be required to issue a survey to faculty, staff, and students. There's a lot that the law doesn't say. And so there's, pretty much a ripple of uncertainty across the state and the university system of, there's really no enforcement mechanism for one. So there's really nothing that outlines what will happen if you're a faculty member or a student and you don't want to take this. So there's no explicit mention as to what will happen to you. There's also no explicit mention as to what will be done with these results, though there's been a lot of suggestions as to what potentially could be done with this. Some Republican lawmakers have suggested that the results could be used to determine policy in the future. There's also Republicans who have said that it could potentially lead to budget cuts. Governor Ron DeSantis, when he signed the bill, he did not say it explicitly, but he suggested that once we find what we have in Florida, we're not going to put tax dollars behind anyone who is found to be, quote unquote, indoctrinating students. So that suggests that potentially there could be some financial repercussions depending on what these results show, if at all any findings are determined.
All right, Ana Ceballos, thank you.
Thank you so much.